After raising my son alone, he said, "You're too old to live here, go to a nursing home." But I discovered that even in the most difficult moments, life can still surprise you with new beginnings, unexpected alliances, and strengths you never knew you had. I dedicated my entire life to my son. I worked 2 jobs, gave up my dreams, and faced every challenge believing he would be my safe haven in old age. But when I needed him most, I heard words I never imagined would come from the mouth of the one I raised with so much love, that I was too old to stay there, and that it would be best for me to go to a nursing home. At that moment I felt invisible, rejected, and profoundly alone. What I didn't know was that, even amidst the pain, there were still people capable of extending a hand. My story is about rediscovering dignity, rebuilding self-esteem, and the unexpected power of truth. Today, I look back and see not just suffering but also rebirth. I'm immensely happy to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment from which city you are watching. I really want to know how far this story has reached. Everything I did in life was for the love of my son. Since Peter was born, my world revolved around him. I worked double shifts, endured sleepless nights, took humiliating jobs, and left dreams behind. I told myself that one day he would understand, that all this effort would not be in vain, that he would become not only a good man but also my support in old age. There were times when exhaustion almost defeated me, but just seeing Peter sleeping peacefully renewed my strength. Growing up without a father never stopped him from smiling, and I did everything to keep that smile. When he fell ill in childhood, I went days without eating properly just to ensure his medicines. When he needed a computer for college, I sold my youthful jewelry. Everything was for him, always for him. The birthday parties I organized alone, the gifts bought in endless installments, the bills paid with tears. All of this was part of my legacy as a mother. I believed that, in time, he would recognize every sacrifice, that he would understand the silent language of maternal love, expressed in small but profound acts. I raised Peter with my heart in my hands, sparing no effort, asking nothing in return. Even when he became a man, I remained there, making lunch when I could, washing his clothes out of habit, waiting for a hug that, little by little, became rarer. But still there was a persistent faith in me. I believed that true motherhood reveals itself over time, that the fruits come slowly. I saw the future as a harvest of love, a deserved reward. I believed my son would be my reward. The way Peter started treating me wasn't sudden, but it hurt as if it were. His voice, once sweet and affectionate, now had an almost mechanical coldness. He looked at me in a hurry, spoke as if everything I said was an annoyance. Conversations became monosyllabic, and the silence between us grew daily. I noticed he avoided including me in plans, as if I were an inconvenient shadow. The last time I tried to talk about our Sunday dinner, he just said, "You don't need to worry about that." Without looking into my eyes, he got up from the table and went to his room. I stayed there, alone with 2 plates served and a heavy heart. When I finally gathered the courage to ask if something was bothering him, his answer cut through me. "Don't you realize how much your presence weighs?" Those words echoed within me like thunder in a closed chamber. I, who thought I was the foundation of the house, was now seen as a burden. It was as if years of love, sacrifice, and care had evaporated. Nothing hurt more than being treated with indifference by someone who once called me a heroic mother. That cold gaze paralyzed me. At that instant, something inside me gave way, but I tried to hide it. I disguised the pain with a weak smile and said that maybe I was indeed getting in the way, just to buy time, just to understand. Deep down, I didn't want to believe he truly felt that way. I thought it was work stress, Paige's influence, anything less sincerity. It was as if I were a stranger in his life. The final blow came on an ordinary day, which made it all the more cruel. I had made cornbread just the way he liked it when he was little. I left it on the table with a new tablecloth, arranging everything like someone trying to rebuild bridges with flowers. When he arrived, he barely looked at the table. He sat down, crossed his arms, and spoke in a tone that chilled my spine. "We need to talk." I thought it would be something trivial, maybe a change in routine, a comment about the house. But no. He took a deep breath, as if about to do me a painful favor. And then, with the casualness of someone throwing away an old object, he said, "You're already at a complicated age, Mom. I think it's time for you to go to a nursing home." My world stopped. For a second, I thought it was a bad joke. But he didn't laugh. He didn't hesitate. That face I had cradled on feverish nights was now telling me I was an inconvenience to be removed. The house I built, the furniture I chose, the memories on the walls, all about to be left behind as if my life no longer had value. I felt a chill of abandonment run down my spine. Paige appeared soon after, feigning surprise at the conversation, but her eyes gleamed with approval. Peter continued talking, explaining the benefits of the nursing home. As if I was missing out by still living under the same roof where he grew up. Every word was a knife twisting in the wound. My heart, which had so often beaten strongly for him, was now breaking in silence. And at that moment something inside me broke. I tried to keep calm, even with my heart in tatters. I looked around that room, the old armchairs, the clock inherited from my mother, the frames with pictures of Peter as a boy. That house was more than walls and furniture. It was the stage of my history, my pains and joys. It was there that I saw my son take his first steps, utter his first words. How could he think I would just leave? With a choked voice I asked to talk with more affection, more time. This house is all I have, Peter. I can't just leave like this. But he averted his gaze, as if my presence caused him discomfort. I spoke of the garden, the flowers I planted on his birthday, the nights I cried for fear of failing. None of it seemed to reach him. There was an invisible barrier between us, built with years of emotional distance. I insisted, saying that I understood life changes, that he had a right to privacy, but that we could look for alternatives. Maybe a renovation, maybe better dividing the spaces. I just wanted to stay where my heart still beat with meaning. But Peter just sighed impatient and replied, "You're getting too attached, Mom." As if it were wrong to love what I built with so much sweat. He mentioned that the world had changed, that today there are places prepared for the elderly. I didn't want a clean, quiet bed. I wanted the familiarity of the creaking floor, the smell of old wood, the vivid memory of my husband who left too soon. With each attempt of emotional appeal, he became more logical, more distant, as if my suffering was just a statistic. But to him it was just brick and cement. Peter changed the subject as if our emotions had an expiry time. With a contained smile, he began to talk about the new cycle he and Paige were planning. He used terms like renewal, fresh start, focus on the future. I wondered why my end had to be their beginning. The way he spoke implied that my leaving was not a sacrifice. It was a plan. He spoke about space, comfort, freedom to host friends. He commented that Paige dreamed of a large, modern living room where she could entertain her colleagues. I felt small, as if my presence prevented them from being happy. As if, by staying there, I was delaying the progress of a life that no longer included me. And Peter seemed eager for this new phase. I remained silent, listening to everything like someone witnessing their own eviction with a polite veneer. Paige, observing from afar, subtly nodded in agreement, smiling faintly. When I looked at Peter again, I noticed something that chilled me. He wasn't speaking with guilt or hesitation. He spoke with enthusiasm. It was as if he was already living that future, and I was just an inconvenient detail to be resolved. For a moment I thought I was exaggerating, but when he mentioned a possible move to a new, more upscale neighborhood, my stomach churned. This wasn't just about reorganizing life. There was something more, a hidden intention between the sweet words. He spoke of tomorrow as if he was about to achieve something, and I was the obstacle. There was an ambitious gleam in his eyes. That same week I started noticing strange things. Whispered conversations between Peter and Paige, papers being hidden when I entered the room. I decided to open a drawer where he kept documents, looking for some explanation. What I found took my breath away. Real estate flyers, broker proposals, photos of modern houses with handwritten captions. One was marked with a red circle and the words, "Real potential." My legs felt weak. This wasn't just an abstract idea. He was already looking for another house. A house that clearly did not include me. I picked up the papers with trembling hands and read the values, the locations. Everything indicated that he planned to use the money from this house, my house, as a down payment for something new. A new home for him away from me. How could he have the nerve? Deep down I knew Paige was behind everything, but it was Peter who signed, who planned, who betrayed me in silence. It was he who heard me cry and still hid these papers. The feeling was of double betrayal, as a mother and as a human being. Until then, I believed it was a problem of coexistence of space. But now I saw it was about possession, about advantage. I returned to my room with a broken heart. Nothing I had said had touched Peter because he had already decided. I was not part of his future. I was the price he needed to pay to have the future he desired. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the framed photo of us years ago, smiling. That image seemed from another world. It wasn't just rejection, it was self-interest. From the start, my relationship with Paige was built on formalities. She always treated me with rehearsed politeness, like someone who smiles out of obligation. But lately, her coldness became evident. She would pass me without greeting, avoid being in the same room, and made sure to close the bedroom door whenever I approached. I tried not to care, but her indifference weighed on me. One morning, as I was watering the plants on the veranda, I heard her voice on the phone saying, "We haven't managed to get her out yet, but it will happen soon." The phrase paralyzed me. When she realized I was nearby, she pretended it was another conversation, but couldn't hide her discomfort. Since then, I noticed her glances were filled with impatience, as if my presence was a flaw in her plan. At breakfast, she criticized the smell of the food, said I took up too much space, questioned the time I spent in the living room. Small barbs that accumulated like invisible needles. I responded with silence, trying to preserve some harmony. But the truth was, I was no longer welcome, and Paige made sure to make that clear in every gesture. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that maybe it was stress, tiredness, some generational conflict. But the contempt growing in her eyes left no doubt. She didn't want me there, and never did. It was only a matter of time until she stopped pretending. In her gaze there was only silent contempt. The confrontation I feared most happened on a quiet late afternoon. We were alone in the kitchen, and Paige was watching me wash the dishes. Without beating around the bush, she said, "It's not personal, Rose. But you're getting in the way." I turned slowly, trying to understand what those words meant. She leaned against the counter and with a coldness that chilled my soul added, "It was my idea. I was the one who suggested to Peter that you go to a nursing home." My hands, still wet, began to tremble. It was no longer a supposition. It was a confession. She was not only involved, she was the mastermind of the plan. Peter hesitated at first, she continued. But I convinced him it was for the best for everyone. I felt a sudden nausea, as if the ground had been pulled from under my feet. That woman, who claimed to respect my history, now admitted she saw me as an obstacle. She justified it with calculated words, saying I deserved specialized care, that their new home would be too small for 3 people. But in her tone there was no concern. There was convenience. Her voice was that of someone eliminating a problem. When I tried to argue, she just smiled and left the kitchen like someone ending a conversation with a subordinate. I stood there, listening to the dripping faucet and the muffled sound of the television coming from the bedroom. Everything inside me screamed, but outwardly I just breathed in silence. Now I knew it wasn't just abandonment, it was an orchestrated plan, cold and cruel. And the person by my son's side was the architect of it all. Suddenly everything made sense. The pain of being rejected by Peter was already a heavy burden to bear. But knowing that everything was encouraged by Paige transformed my resentment into something deeper. A double betrayal. The woman he chose to love saw me as a burden to be discarded, and he accepted that view without hesitation. The trust one placed in him crumbled into dust. I was no longer the mother, I was a hindrance. I remembered every night I wished Peter would find someone who would make him happy. I prayed for his life to be complete. I never imagined that this happiness would come at the cost of my exile. And now, surrounded by walls that once housed affection, I was a stranger in my own home. Everything I built with love was being dismantled for convenience. I cried in silence, hidden in my room so no one would see me weak. But inside something began to change. The pain that once paralyzed me now burned with another force. Indignation. I could no longer accept being treated as invisible. If they were building a plan to remove me, I needed to build one to defend myself. I deserved more than crumbs of respect. The betrayal broke me, but it also awakened me. I saw everything more clearly now. Peter and Paige were in this together. They had their reasons, but I also had my story. And it wasn't a story that would end like this, in silence, being erased by those who should honor me. No, something in me was beginning to awaken. But I wouldn't stay silent forever. I started avoiding leaving the house, afraid of running into neighbors and seeing the reflection of my humiliation in their eyes. But one gray morning, as I was collecting clothes from the clothesline, I heard a soft voice from the other side of the fence. "Good morning, Mrs. Rose. Is everything all right?" It was Adam, my neighbor across the street. Always polite, but until then just a cordial acquaintance. That day, his tone had something different. It took me a few seconds to answer. I was tired of pretending everything was fine. I gave a faint smile, trying to hide the tears that often came. He didn't insist, just kept talking about the weather, the plants, his son. But there was something in his gaze that made me drop my guard. It was as if he saw beyond my silence. And I no longer had the strength to keep up the facade. The next day, he appeared with a pot of flowers. He said Isaac had chosen them to cheer me up. I thanked him, feeling a lump in my throat. It was the first time in weeks that someone cared without ulterior motives. We talked for a few minutes, and I realized that his gentle presence began to comfort me. He didn't ask questions, but he left space for me to speak. Little by little, Adam started appearing more often, always with something in his hands. A pie, a book, or just a "How are you today?" It was subtle but constant. His calm and firm manner brought me peace. And without realizing it, I started waiting for those moments. Because, for the first time in a long time, someone looked at me with humanity. He spoke as if he understood my pain. One afternoon, when Peter and Paige had gone out, I accepted Adam's invitation for tea on his porch. I sat with my hands clasped, trying to find the right words. He just offered me a cup and said, "You can talk if you want." And I wanted to. Maybe it was the accumulation, maybe it was the silence that was suffocating me. But I started to tell him everything. I spoke of the subtle changes, the glances, the hidden conversations, until I got to the cruel phrase that still echoed, "Go to a nursing home." He listened without interrupting, just nodding from time to time. When I mentioned the papers and the plans to sell the house, his expression changed. It wasn't surprise, it was understanding. As if each of my pains had a mirror in his soul. The feeling of unburdening myself was strange and liberating. It was the first time I had said aloud what I had been swallowing for weeks. I felt shame but also relief. When I finished, he remained silent for a few seconds and then said, "You don't deserve this." That simple phrase was like a silent hug. I needed to hear that. I needed to feel that there was still someone on my side. I went home with a lighter heart. Not that the pains had passed, but for the first time they were shared. Knowing that someone knew my truth strengthened me. Adam didn't promise solutions, but he gave me something even rarer. Listening and respect. And from then on, my loneliness ceased to be absolute. I had never said those words aloud. A few days later, sitting in the same spot, Adam revealed something that left me speechless. He told me that years ago, when he lost his wife, he also faced the contempt of those who should have supported him. His wife's family blamed him for her death, pulled away, and he was left alone with his young son. He said he cried in secret so as not to scare Isaac, and he learned to survive with the absence. Hearing that made me see him with new eyes. Adam wasn't just kind, he knew abandonment from the inside. It wasn't empathy out of convenience, it was a sharing of pain. And at that moment I felt there was something stronger connecting us. The experience of someone who was left behind but kept standing. He wasn't speaking out of pity. He was speaking from knowing what it's like to be forgotten. He said that, from the beginning, he noticed my empty gaze and wanted to reach out. And that Isaac, with his boyish sensitivity, also noticed my sadness. That moved me deeply. Even without blood ties, a family of affection was forming there. Something Peter seemed to have forgotten. That true bonds are not imposed, they are built. When I said goodbye that afternoon, Adam held my hand and said firmly, "You won't go through this alone, Rose." And for the first time in a long time I believed it. Because there was sincerity in his voice and history in his eyes. And at that moment I realized that perhaps there was a way, even if painful, out of that house. And he promised I wouldn't face it alone. Adam noticed my distress when I mentioned that Peter wanted me to sign some papers. He said he knew someone trustworthy who could review the documents. That's how I met Theo. A lawyer with a calm demeanor and keen eyes. The next day he appeared with a folder, ready to listen. I sat with trembling hands, handing over the papers like someone sharing a secret. Theo began reading with the seriousness of someone who understands the weight of each line. His eyes scanned the technical terms, while I tried to decipher his expressions. At one point he frowned and asked for silence. He flipped through a few more pages, made quick notes, and finally laid the papers on the table. "This isn't right, Mrs. Rose." My heart pounded. I explained that Peter had said it was a bureaucratic process, just a temporary transfer to expedite the sale. Theo shook his head negatively. "These terms don't protect you. On the contrary, they leave everything in his hands." A wave of nausea washed over me. I had almost signed without reading, trusting someone who was no longer the same son. Theo stood up and began to copy the documents, promising to analyze everything more carefully in his office. Adam, who had remained silent until then, placed his hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing not to sign anything." And for the first time I realized how much closer the danger was than I imagined. It wasn't just rejection. It was an attack on my dignity. What seemed simple hit traps. 2 days later, Theo returned with an even more serious expression. I waited in silence as he opened the folder, sitting before me and Adam. "Rose, what Peter tried to do here is serious." He explained that, if I had signed, I would be surrendering all my rights to the house, without any guarantee of return. It was as if legally I would cease to exist there. The clauses were deliberately confusing, disguised in jargon that would escape any layperson. A dirty strategy, hidden under the guise of a standard document. Theo pointed to a specific line. "Here he establishes that, after the sale, you will not be entitled to any value." My body trembled. I was about to sign my own expulsion. Theo's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from indignation. This isn't just manipulation, it's attempted fraud. I was speechless. It was hard to accept that Peter, the same boy who slept in my lap, now acted with such coldness. Adam approached, holding my hand firmly. "We're going to stop this." Anger gave way to sadness. How could someone born of me try to erase me in this way? The house was all I had left, and he wanted to rip it from me with a piece of paper and a signature. I looked again at those documents, now as proof of something much bigger, the complete disconnection between the son I raised and the man he had become. Peter not only wanted my house, he wanted to erase my history. After taking a deep breath, I wiped my eyes and looked at Theo with a different demeanor. "What do I need to do?" He explained the next steps, the rights that still protected me, and that I was not alone. Something within me rose at that moment. For the first time since everything began, I felt I had control. That my voice still had value. And that I could fight. It was no longer just about keeping a roof over my head. It was about protecting my memory, my identity, my history. Signing those papers would be accepting to disappear. But now, with Theo and Adam by my side, I saw a chance to resist. I told myself that, no matter how much it hurt, I would not let them silence me. Peter might have forgotten who I was, but I hadn't. I began to organize the house records, old receipts, renovation photos, anything that proved my connection to that place. It was almost therapeutic to revisit every corner of my journey. Every photo I found was a reminder that this house was mine in every detail, every laugh and every tear. I was not a guest, I was the root. At night, I sat on the porch with Adam and Isaac. They listened in silence as I told stories of Peter's childhood. And even through tears, I smiled. I still existed. There was still beauty in me. And now I had something Peter didn't expect. Allies, knowledge, and courage. The fight wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. I had little, but now I had a weapon, the truth. Isaac started to approach me with the lightness that only children have. Always curious, he would appear on the porch with a toy in his hand or an unexpected question. Over time, we began to share small routines. I would prepare tea, he would bring cookies. It was as if he knew I needed something simple and true. His presence filled spaces I didn't even know were empty. One afternoon he offered me a drawing. It was me sitting on a park bench with a giant sun behind me. When I asked what that meant, he replied, "You look like someone who keeps warmth inside, even when it's cloudy." That phrase disarmed me. Isaac was only 12 years old, but he saw with a rare sensitivity. And he saw me in a way I couldn't even see myself anymore. I started waiting for him like someone waiting for relief. Isaac laughed at my old stories, asked about my youth, and made me feel alive. Adam said his son always had an old heart, one that understands the pain of others even without explanation. And I increasingly felt that that boy brought me something I thought I had lost: hope. It was on one of those days that I noticed, looking at Isaac smiling with bright eyes, that there was something familiar there. The purity, the affection, the dedication. All of it reminded me of a time when Peter was also like that. As a child, he had that same sweetness, until the world hardened him. Or perhaps he chose to harden on his own. In his smile, I saw reflections of Peter as a boy. On a quiet late afternoon, Isaac found me sitting alone and asked why I was sad. I hesitated for a moment but ended up saying, "Sometimes the people we love most forget who we are." He frowned, confused. He asked if I was talking about Peter, and that surprised me. I answered with a slow nod. He sat beside me and remained quiet, waiting for me to continue. Carefully, I told him that Peter wanted me to leave, that he thought I was too old to live there. I spoke of the house, of the history, of the days when I was both mother and woman at the same time, with no one to share the responsibilities. I didn't go into painful details, but I showed him the emptiness that resided within me. Isaac listened like few adults would. In silence, attentive, present. When I finished, he said nothing immediately. He just took my hand with both of his and held it firmly. Then, with a choked voice, he murmured, "If I were your son, I would never let you go." My eyes filled with tears. That child gave me more comfort than Peter had given me in years. It was a simple gesture but full of meaning. Isaac asked if he could tell his father. I said yes, but that I didn't want him to get involved. Deep down, I still feared making the situation worse. But what I didn't know was that the heart of a just boy cannot remain silent in the face of wrong. And Isaac, even at his age, was about to take an action that would change everything. He listened to me with tear-filled eyes. It happened on a weekend during a small lunch at Adam's house. Peter and Paige had been invited, more out of formality than desire. I tried to maintain composure, sitting in silence while everyone chatted. Isaac, however, was restless. He crossed his arms, observing his father and the guests intently. At one point, Peter casually commented about restructuring the house for the future. That's when Isaac abruptly stood up, his face red and his voice firm. "Restructure what? To kick your mother out?" Everyone stopped. The silence was absolute. Paige tried to change the subject, but Isaac continued. "She told me what you want to do. You want to sell her house. That's wrong." The room became still. Peter opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He hadn't expected that. Adam tried to intervene, but Isaac pressed on. "She raised you alone. You should be on your knees thanking her, not trying to throw her away." Every word was a direct arrow. I wanted to interrupt, to spare him, but something inside me urged me to let him speak. It was as if my voice, stifled for so long, had finally found a pure, just, and true channel. And no one there could refute him. Peter tried to laugh nervously, saying it was a complicated situation, but no one listened to him with respect anymore. What Isaac had said had hit home. Paige lowered her eyes, and I, for the first time in a long time, felt protected. Because even a child knew that what they were doing to me was cruel. And now everyone knew. A child's words exposed the truth he tried to hide. After what Isaac did, something in me truly awakened. It was time to stop retreating. With Adam and Theo's help, we organized an informal meeting, under the pretext of a Sunday lunch. I invited Peter, Paige, some old neighbors, and 2 distant aunts and uncles. I wanted witnesses. I wanted eyes. I wanted the truth to be brought into the light where before there was only shadow. My heart trembled, but my legs were firm. When Peter entered, I noticed he seemed uncomfortable. Perhaps he suspected something. Paige, as always, maintained her superior air, sitting as if she owned the house. I looked around and took a deep breath. With a serene voice, I asked for everyone's attention. I have something to say, and I will no longer keep it inside me. I felt my heart beating in my temples. But now it wasn't fear, it was accumulated courage. I explained what had been happening. The papers, the plans to sell, the idea of sending me to a nursing home. I spoke of the daily humiliations, the words that hurt me, the pain of being treated as a burden. No one interrupted me. Adam was by my side, firm as a foundation. Theo watched attentively, ready to confirm every detail. and around me all eyes began to change expression. It was at that moment that I faced Peter directly. You are not just selling a house. You are trying to erase the woman who gave you everything. I saw the shock on his face. He opened his mouth, but no justification came. Paige averted her gaze, restless. And there, in that instant of exposure, everything that had been hidden for so long came to light like a whirlwind. The room fell into absolute silence. With everyone's attention on me, I continued. I spoke of the 2 jobs I held to support him, the sleepless nights, the illnesses I ignored so he could have medicine, school, books. As you grew up, I shrunk, hoping that one day you would also grow as a man. The words came out hot, full of an old pain, but now transformed into truth. It wasn't an accusation, it was liberation. Every memory I brought up was a brick in the wall separating Peter from what he had done. I didn't ask for luxury or recognition. I only asked for respect. And you didn't even know how to give that. The room remained still, as if time had stopped. Paige bit her lips, nervous. Peter kept his eyes down, and I knew. That hurt him more than any argument. Because now everyone saw. Theo stood up and showed copies of the documents Peter had tried to make me sign. She was almost deceived by the one who should have protected her most. The expressions around changed from astonishment to indignation. Some neighbors whispered among themselves. Others just shook their heads in disapproval. My story, once muffled within the walls, now echoed where it needed to. And there was no way to ignore it anymore. Paige tried to say something, but Theo interrupted her firmly. You knew. And you encouraged it. She fell silent. And I, feeling the strength of my own voice, concluded. I may have aged, but I have not lost my dignity. And that is what you will not take from me. It was the climax. It was my moment. And when I finished, I could feel it. Something had changed. The weight of my words fell upon him like a sentence. Peter seemed smaller than I had ever seen him. He tried to find words, but each attempt came out weak, without firmness. The people around him looked at him with disbelief. No one saw the dedicated son he might have pretended to be anymore. All that remained was the man who tried to rip his own mother out of her history. Paige, feeling the judgment grow, stood up and left the room without saying a word. The embarrassment was absolute. When Peter finally looked up, he tried to say that everything was misinterpreted. But no one believed him. The evidence was there, the silences too. Theo made sure to emphasize that any attempt to sell the house without my authorization would be subject to legal action. And I, beside him, just nodded without needing to shout. My strength was in what I had revealed, and in what everyone had seen. Peter sat down, head bowed. For the first time, I noticed something different in his gaze. Not anger, not superiority, but perhaps shame. Or was it just the fear of being exposed? I couldn't be sure. But there, before everyone, his ambition crumbled. He tried to maintain composure, but it was too late. The judgment was not legal, it was moral. And he had lost. Slowly, the guests began to say goodbye. Some hugged me, others whispered words of support. Adam stayed with me until the end. The house, for the first time in months, felt lighter. But even with that feeling of victory, a question lingered. The wound still bled, and the future was uncertain. Because there is something that even the truth cannot guarantee. But it remained to be seen. Would there be remorse or just wounded pride? After the confrontation, Paige was never the same. The haughty and calculating woman now avoided crossing paths with me in the hallways, as if my presence diminished her. She tried to maintain some appearance of control, but her influence over Peter began to crumble. Her visits to the house became rarer and rarer, and when she came, she was silent, uncomfortable. She knew the masks had fallen, and so did I. In time, it became clear that she had lost the space she so desired to dominate. Not just within the house, but within the narrative she upheld. The support of the neighbors and Peter's own family made it impossible to maintain the manipulations. Her coldness no longer found an echo, only resistance. And faced with that, she retreated, not out of repentance, but out of lack of an audience. One day, I watched through the window as she said goodbye to Peter in a hurry, and got into a waiting car. There were no kisses, no promises. Just a quick gesture and a heavy silence. With the truth exposed, she was left with the discomfort of being seen as an accomplice to injustice. And although part of me still held resentment, another part simply let her go. Paige left, leaving behind the traces of a story she tried to erase, but which was now more alive than ever. I no longer needed to confront her. Her absence was answer enough. And when we crossed paths for the last time in silence, I could look at her with serenity, because at that moment finally I understood something profound. Her eyes no longer had power over me. Peter in turn took longer to take a stand. He avoided looking me directly in the eye, as if he was still trying to digest the public shame. But little by little he started to seek me out. He brought rehearsed words, timid attempts to justify the unjustifiable. I got lost, Mom. It all happened so fast. I just wanted the best for everyone. I listened to him, but I wasn't moved. The pain he caused wouldn't disappear with half a dozen excuses. I needed more than superficial regret. I needed awareness. And even if he cried, as he once did in the kitchen, there was no way to erase what was done. I messed up badly, he said. And I just replied, yes, you did. For the first time I didn't soften his fall. I let him feel the ground. Peter insisted, tried to resume conversations, do small favors. But I was firm. I didn't deny dialogue, but I didn't offer comfort. Something inside me had changed. The mother who expected affection now demanded respect. And the son who saw me as a burden now needed to learn to see me as a woman, whole, strong, a survivor. Even if there was a desire for forgiveness within me, it wouldn't come easy. Being a mother was never about accepting everything. It was also about teaching. And if Peter truly wanted to find his way back, he would need to start with humility. Because my house might have open doors, but my heart, it now had conscious locks. This time apologies weren't enough. With Paige's departure and Peter's respectful silence, I found space to truly breathe. Adam became even more present, and Isaac continued to bring lightness to my days. Theo, firm and patient, helped me to officially register my ownership of the house, ensuring my security. And it was through him that I met Kate, a sweet-souled nurse who became a friend and inspiration. Kate introduced me to other paths. Volunteer activities, discussion groups, projects for seniors. And I, who previously only thought about surviving, began to think about living. I felt that, at last, I could choose. Choose what to do, where to be, with whom to share my days. I was no longer a woman on the sidelines of my own story. I was the author of the next pages. I organized the rooms, replaced curtains, planted new flowers in the garden. Small gestures that, together, symbolized my reconstruction. Adam helped me with tools while Isaac painted signs with positive phrases. The house now had more than memories, it had new beginnings. Every corner breathed a different energy. And for the first time in years I smiled with fullness. I didn't go back to being who I was. I became someone even better. Not because of the pain, but because I had overcome it. For having transformed wounds into strengths, and humiliations into freedom. And looking back, I understood. The woman who was almost silenced now spoke loudly. And her voice echoed more than she ever imagined. I had not lost, I had been reborn. Returning to a nursing home was an emotional challenge. The first time I entered there after everything, my heart raced. But this time I wasn't there as a resident, nor as someone being pushed by life. I was there as a volunteer. With Kate by my side, I met ladies and gentlemen with incredible stories and profound silences. I started visiting them weekly, bringing conversations, cakes, and listening. The atmosphere was silent but not empty. I realized that many there had also been forgotten by their children, traded for comfort and convenience. In every face that looked at me with surprise, I saw reflections of myself weeks ago. But I also brought them something they might have been waiting for. Presence with affection, without pity. There I found a new way to belong. Some called me the Lady of Beautiful Stories. Others just smiled when I entered. I spoke little about myself, but every gesture of mine was a message. You still matter. Sitting next to someone in silence, holding a trembling hand, laughing at an old memory. All of this was life pulsating again. And I felt more useful than ever. It was there that I understood the greatest truth of all. Even pain can become a bridge. And that starting over at any age is a way to win. I was no longer in the place of the victim, but of the seed. And where there was once fear, now there was purpose. There I saw that my pain could turn into hope. On a sunny afternoon, Isaac appeared at home with a gift hidden behind his back. He ran in as if guarding a precious secret. Close your eyes, he asked enthusiastically. I obeyed, smiling curiously. I felt his little hands place something in my lap. When I opened my eyes, I saw a drawing made with colored pencils. It was me with shimmering silver hair, surrounded by flowers and a balloon with the phrase, "My grandmother by heart." My chest tightened with tenderness. The childlike drawing carried a depth that no adult word could ever reach. The image of myself on that paper was not a caricature of old age, but a portrait of strength and beauty. Isaac looked at me eagerly, waiting for my reaction. I just hugged him, squeezing him with all the love I held within me. "Did you like it?" he asked with sparkling eyes. I replied with a choked voice. I loved it. That gesture, so pure, validated everything I had lived. I was no longer just a mother, now I was also a grandmother by soul. And that made me whole. Receiving that title, coming from the heart of a child, was more than symbolic. It was healing. I kept the drawing in a special frame. And every morning it reminded me that true bonds don't require blood, but affection. Isaac had offered me a new place in the world, and I accepted it with gratitude. Because in the end, love finds paths where before there was only emptiness. The tears that fell now were sweet. Today, looking at my life, I no longer see rubble. I see firm roots and branches that are reborn. I learned that abandonment does not define who we are, but invites us to choose who we want to be from it. I am not a burden, as I was once made to believe. I am a woman who survived, resisted, and chose to rebuild herself with dignity. And that is more than strength, it is a legacy. I spent years being only the haven for others. Now I am also my own shelter. And this does not mean living alone, but living with awareness of one's own worth. Adam remains by my side with his silent tenderness. Theo, always attentive, became a soul friend. Kate, with her sweetness, reminds me that there is humanity in every gesture. And Isaac? Well, he is my private son. I don't have a great fortune nor many possessions, but I have respect, affection, and a home that carries my history. Growing old did not make me invisible. It made me true. And for that, every day when I open my eyes, I thank myself for having chosen myself. Chosen to continue. Chosen to live truly. I am not the woman who started this story. I am the woman who transformed it. Because deep down, every tear served to water something new. And today I bloom not despite the pain but because of it. At 62 years old I discovered, it is not age that defines a life, it is courage. Now, I'm curious about you who heard my story. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you experienced something similar? Support the channel. Subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. I'm leaving another story on the final screen that you will also like, and it will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.